Give me some noise. Appreciate it. All right, gentlemen, we all know each other, but I would love to start with an introduction just so we can be familiar to the audience. Alex, do you want to go first?
Sure. Alex, I'm one of the founders and CEO of CitizenX.
You wanna tell us how you got into that, what brought you into the industry, and what CitizenX actually does?
Sure. CitizenX is the world's first platform to invest in citizenship. And what got me into the industry was basically that I saw many trends converging back in 2020, especially with the pandemic, the restrictions on travel, the rise of remote work, cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin, and everything converged into what is today CitizenX.
Thank you, Alex. Nuri?
Why don't you introduce yourself first?
Of course. Hi, everybody. I'm Katie. I'm a founder and CEO of Plan B Passport. We all work in the same industry. So what we do at Plan B Passport, we help Bitcoiners all over the world to obtain second citizenship or residency for their benefits. And I'm an immigrant myself. When I was 21, I moved from Russia to the United States. I got scammed by my immigration lawyer, and I had to self-represent. And through my own experience, I guess it was blessing after all, I realized that I'm pretty good at that stuff. And the more I was looking into that, the more I realized that having a second residency, a second citizenship, also almost a necessity in this day and age. So I was just talking about it on Twitter, and at some point I realized, okay, I have enough expertise and enough audience to start a business. That's how Plan B Passport started 5 years ago, and that's what I'm doing as of this day. Nuri.
I don't really even remember why and how I got into it, because it was 32 years ago that I started my business. Actually, I was living in Russia, even though I'm Canadian and American. I have 5 citizenships. I got into it for all sorts of other reasons, but currently I practice immigration law in Canada. We are licensed by the most amount of governments around the world to actually represent the clients in this quasi-judicial application for citizenship. We do this throughout the Caribbean. There are 5 countries in the Caribbean that have these programs. We do this in Europe. We consult governments on the creation and management of these kinds of programs. We helped create a program in the country of Montenegro. We've helped create a residence by investment program that we actually, to this day, still manage for the government in the island of Anguilla. It's a tax residency program that works for, unfortunately, not so much for Americans, but for Europeans and others. So that's what we do. We sort of do the legal representation side of this industry.
One term that you might be familiar with, but we still want to define it at this panel, is flag theory. My definition of flag theory is the way of limiting your dependency on any one particular state by obtaining a citizenship or residency or other kind of flag in different jurisdictions. Bitcoin would be another flag in a flag theory because it's in cyberspace, it's borderless, stateless money. But another thing that I want to say about flag theory, that's a true capitalism brought to you by nation states, right? Because when you're born in a country with a single citizenship, you have a monopoly over you. Your government has this monopoly. But then you start to shop for a better service at a better price, or better jurisdictional arbitrage, as we all like to say. So the question that I want to ask you, what really motivates people to get a second citizenship, second residency? Why do they consider that, and why do they go for it? Like goals, what are their goals and needs?
Yeah, I think you touched a very interesting point, and I think the distinction should be made between residency and citizenship, and that is something that people still don't get, because citizenship is basically king, is the highest set of rights that a country can grant you, and for Bitcoiners and for Bitcoin, Bitcoin is the king of money. Our investor Balaji, he was the former CTO at Coinbase. He likes to say that money is king and Bitcoin is king, but passport is queen. So, citizenship is basically the highest set of rights that you can get from a country, and it really impacts the travel freedom for people, where they can travel, where they can live, their settlement rights, but also where they can do business. If people can attend these kind of conferences, if someone from the audience had trouble coming in here, networking, meeting people, incorporating businesses, as you said, that's also very important. And especially for Americans, I would say it's an insurance. It's not only for tax optimization purposes, but it's an insurance against, the government undergoing some turmoil, some trouble, and really the only insurance that you can buy against your government is another citizenship.
Well, I think the answer to that question really depends on where a person is from. So Katie is from Russia, and we have a lot of clients in Russia. We have offices in Russia, and Russian people are very, very limited in the places that they can travel because they need visas to go anywhere. So one of the reasons to get citizenship is to avoid the whole visa issue. That's the reason for probably 90% of this industry, because most of the people in this industry are actually not from America. America is a very small market for citizenship by investment. The main markets are China, the Middle East, Russia, now Ukraine. So they're generally just looking for the visa-free travel. In terms of Americans, America is obviously at as Kennedy said yesterday, an inflection point right now, where I think a couple of weekends ago we were a quarter of an inch away from civil war. We've seen in a few years ago there was an attempted coup in America. The people here call it the events of January 6th, but it was basically a mob, an organized mob, taking over the parliament of the country. It didn't work. They were trying to, if you remember, kill Mike Pence. They were trying to block Mike Pence from passing on the presidency and allowing Trump to stay on as president with all that entails. Now, that kind of thing reminds me of what happened in Germany on November 9th, 1923. If any of you guys remember that, you probably don't. But there was a coup also. It lasted one day, called the Beer Hall Putsch. It was put down. They killed a few people, sort of like on January 6th. But it was put down, and the leaders of the coup were put in jail for a few years. And one of the leaders of the coup, a gentleman who you may have heard of by the name of Adolf Hitler, was in jail for a few years. He wrote a nice book called Mein Kampf. And in 1933, 10 years later, he became the dictator of Germany, and the rest is history. 10 years after he was put in jail for the attempted coup that didn't work. And so we just don't know where anything is going. And so when we talk about diversification of risks, financial risks, you diversify into Bitcoin or other assets, and this is a kind of a personal diversification of risk.
Yeah, I really like the point that you made, how this is a custom-tailored process, right? So depending on your starting point, your home country government, and the current geopolitics, you will custom-tailor your strategy on your second citizenship and residency. So my audience is actually mostly American, and American clients are not ready to leave just yet, but they want to have this insurance policy, just like you said, Alex. They want to have this Plan B passport. I wanted to make another point. Yeah, so flag theory is like a security model, right? And when it comes to security model, you all know you consider your Bitcoin security model based on your goals and needs. Do you need to take care of inheritance, or do you need to travel a lot? Depending on that, you will figure out what works for you. Is it a multi-sig? Is it just a brain wallet or whatever? You will customize your security model for your Bitcoin. Same goes for a second citizenship, a residency. Depending on your starting point, your goals and needs, it will look different for everybody. That's why we all work with different jurisdictions trying to find what suits you best. My next question for you guys would be, we're at a Bitcoin conference, right? So
Really?
what specifically motivates Bitcoiners to obtain a second citizenship? What's their thought process? Because it's different audience. Flag theory used to be for wealthy bankers and finance bros. Now Bitcoiners are a big part of the clientele. So what do you see within Bitcoin mindset that sets them to go get a second citizenship?
I think citizenship has a lot of similarities with Bitcoin in the sense that the same people who are here in the audience probably 10 years ago, they thought, hey, maybe I don't believe so much in this fiat system, and they decided to vote with their wallet and buy Bitcoin, and that was their way or your way of expressing your disbelief in this system and that you wanted something else. You found a better alternative. You found something else that was more aligned with your values and your view of the world, and that was giving you also something in return. It was giving you sound money. And I think today many people think, why would I need a second citizenship? And normal people probably don't ask themselves those questions. But I think right now in the Bitcoin conference, many people are starting to ask themselves if it would be also useful for them to invest in their citizenship, both with their wallet, both with their feet, and show that they don't believe in the system anymore, and they want to find better alternatives in places that align with their values, in places that give them a better value for their money, and this is either moving somewhere else or the easiest or less frictionless actually the frictionless path to do it can be just investing in citizenship. You can do it from anywhere in the world, and you are casting your vote of exit to your current citizenship.
Well, I have a little bit of a different take on this. First of all, most of the clients in this industry are not really the super rich. They're what I call generally poor millionaires, people with a net worth of between $2 and $5 million, not the billionaires, not the 100 millionaires and things like that. A lot of the reason is that there are just a lot more of them. There are a lot more people with $2 million than there are with $100 million or $1 billion. And they start thinking about it at that once they get into that range. But the interesting thing about the Bitcoin thing, Bitcoin is and I don't know that much about Bitcoin. I own a bunch, but it's a philosophy, and it's a philosophy of freedom. And having a second citizenship adds to your freedom to a certain extent. It also, to be honest, we say you're under the control of one government, so now you're under the control of two governments. There are different ways of looking at it. But there is this philosophy of that amongst people who are investing in Bitcoin, that they want to diversify out of hard assets, out of stocks, bonds, real estate, whatever it is, into Bitcoin to gain freedom. The ironic thing about this whole thing is that while gaining a second citizenship does add an aspect of freedom, for Bitcoiners, it's actually a diversification out of Bitcoin, not into Bitcoin, because in order to gain this citizenship, it can only be gained through an investment in fiat, and in either in real estate, or it's a donation to a government, or it's a purchase of government bonds, and all of that has to be done in fiat. It can't be done in Bitcoin. There's no way to do it in Bitcoin, unfortunately, until governments change. But most of the governments who have these programs are small little islands, like where I live in Antigua in the Caribbean. It's a country of 70,000 people. It's not going to be it won't be allowed by Uncle Sam to become it's Bitcoin friendly, it says, but the currency is very, very much controlled by the Fed, the Caribbean currencies, controlled by the Fed. So, yeah, there's a way to sort of it's nice to gain the freedom, but unfortunately, right now, it's kind of a way of diversifying. It's for whatever the cost is of diversifying a little bit out of Bitcoin.
Well, one reason Bitcoiners are still willing to do that is, for example, American citizens know that 6102 event. Anybody familiar with 6102? Yeah, when the gold was seized, basically nobody could self-custody their gold. And obviously they can't seize your Bitcoin per se. All you have to do is have 12 words in your mind, and they can take that away. But they can come after Bitcoiners. Like, we're all sitting here at this conference. We are in some way a target for the next 10 years, for sure. So one of the reasons they want to have this exit strategies, if something like this happens in the US, another 6102 on Bitcoin, they have another country to call home. They're getting out and they're not dealing with it. They're dealing with it from the outside. So that's why I think Bitcoiners are still willing to go for it.
And I also think it's unnecessary diversification that people need to do, because having one citizenship means having no options. So basically, you are at the mercy of one institution, one agency, the IRS. And there are countries who are aligned with your values, that are aligned with Bitcoin. For example, there are no countries accepting Bitcoin. El Salvador has a Bitcoin program. I know you work with them. I was just talking with Max yesterday. He's an advisor to Bukele. Great guys. They are aligned with Bitcoin. They understand it, and they want to welcome people like you. And I think it's also important to work with these governments to make them understand that welcoming talented people like you that believe in Bitcoin, that believe in the ideas of freedom is very important, and that's where the future is going to be. So investing today in citizenship is also an investment, not just a diversification, but an investment and a bet into these countries that are aligned with the ideas of freedom.
Nuri, I also want to ask you questions. You live in Antigua. You are in the midst of it. And in the current state of this investment migration industry, we just experienced a lot of changes. Well, next week, let's say. The last couple of months were a little crazy because the Caribbean islands announced that they are going to be basically doubling their prices for citizenship by investment programs. And I'm sure you've talked to a local citizenship by investment unit quite a bit. So what do you see the current trend in the Caribbean? How will the clientele respond to this doubling of the price? And what really pushed the Caribbean islands to do that move?
Well, I speak to the citizenship unit all the time, but we've been speaking to we helped actually change the law in Antigua, and we advise the other governments on how to change prices and other aspects of it. Unfortunately, as I said, Uncle Sam or Big Brother or whatever you want to call him has a lot of influence all over the world, and as does the European Union. And the European Union and the American government came to the Caribbean countries over the last few years, but especially over the last year. These programs were really, really, really popular all over the world. And the government, both in the United States and the EU, decided that too many people were getting these citizenships. As I said yesterday, whenever you're giving out a passport, whenever a country gives out a passport, the country has to understand that they're part of the international security apparatus, and that when they give that passport, they're putting all the other countries at risk. And so those other countries are concerned with who they're allowing into their... Antigua allows people into France, and so France is worried about who Antigua is giving their citizenship to. So as bureaucrats do, they came up with this brilliant idea of doubling the prices for the citizenship, thinking that somebody who can pay $200,000 rather than $100,000 is a better person in some way and is a safer person in some way. It was a totally illogical, kind of stupid thing. And so, yes, so they've doubled the prices as of July 3rd, as of July 1, and in Antigua they got an extra month. They're doubling it tomorrow, Thursday or something like that. But in all honesty, what it is that it's coming back to what it was 10 years ago. Competition amongst the countries that have created these programs. There have been programs that have been opened and closed and all that. They've been competing on price, and they've been lowering their price over and over for 10 years. And now they just got back. They moved back to the prices that they actually were in 2014, 2013. So it's really just a move back to where they were, and an adjustment back to how it should have been from the beginning.
I wish they would just keep up with inflation, they're just matching inflation rate every year, because I truly hate all these changes in the industry. They lower the price, they do discount, and then they double the price, and I have to explain it to my client. Well, I dislike it strongly.
The governments are concerned about the governments, and they're concerned about their own people. They don't care about the business of the industry, even though the business people in this industry who find the clients are the ones who bring the money to the government. But the governments have a mandate to take care of their country, not so much you or me, or they don't care about us.
Alex, let me ask you. So this prices has changed mostly under the pressure from the EU. You are in the EU currently, right? Most of the time.
Yeah, I spend most of the time between Lisbon in Portugal and Zug in Switzerland, where the company is headquartered. But I think what's the interesting trend here is that we are seeing all of these countries from the ascending world, countries that are attracting the right folks and that are incentivizing with the right policies, and then we are seeing kind of the descending world, and we are seeing many places in Europe that are becoming less and less desirable. So I think that the trend is very clear, and increasingly this visa-free access to places in the descending world is going to be less relevant, and people are going to think more about visa-free access and the ability to travel, the ability to do business in the ascending world, in places like the UAE, like Singapore, or like El Salvador or Argentina. And I think this trend is really interesting, and especially countries that use Bitcoin to fundraise themselves directly from new citizens, issuing citizenships, like Michael Saylor was saying yesterday, issuing debt to buy more Bitcoin. Issuing citizenship can also be a strategy for these countries to raise more funds to buy Bitcoin. And I think it's a signal for people like us to go there, because we see that they align with our strategies, they align with our values, and the possibilities that the Western countries and especially the ascending world bring are going to be less and less appealing versus the possibilities and the opportunities that the ascending world brings.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes I'm like, how does EU still holds that power to manipulate Caribbean citizenship by investment programs? But that brings me to another question. So American clientele market has been growing quite a bit. That's most of my clients are from the United States. And I feel like the more this market grows in the US, the more Uncle Sam wants to be involved, right? Like they are more incentivized to go after those CBI programs. So do you see that as a risk? Because first we've seen a big spike in American clientele, COVID started, election, right? Last election, half the country were unhappy with the result. This election, another half the country going to be unhappy with the result again. So every election we see that spike. Do you think the U.S. are going to go after CBIs in the Caribbean too and try to mess with it?
Well, there are a few answers to that. I started my career, as I mentioned, in Russia, and everybody used to ask me, isn't the Russian government going to come after you for taking money out of Russia and people out of Russia? And I was like, no, they know exactly what I'm doing, and they're fine with it, and I've been doing it for 32 years, and it's no big deal. Number one, I don't think that the movement in America is going to make any kind of, however many people invest in CBI, in citizenship, it's a blip on the in terms of the $1 trillion GDP kind of thing and all the debt and all the other problems that they have. But that's the first thing. The second thing is the main concern that the American government has is of control, and not so much in terms of the citizenship program. They want to control the money flows. They want to control the banking and the AML. So as long as the countries that are accepting new citizens are doing incredibly robust due diligence, and which I said when I spoke yesterday is quite intrusive. As long as they're doing that robust due diligence and they know exactly who they're accepting, and they make sure that these people aren't criminals and don't have any kind of potential of being criminals, oh, that's hard to figure out. The Americans will only be trying to make sure that the money is being controlled, and that obviously is more of a reason of why Americans would be interested in gaining citizenship and moving offshore, because they don't want to have their money controlled. But there's a lot of risk actually as we speak today, in that the correspondent banking, which we all know is a kind of an evil thing, an evil way of controlling the whole international financial system. There's a risk that the American correspondent banks are going to close down and stop accepting CBI money, in which case we're going to have a very big problem. Yeah. That might be coming very soon, so if anybody's interested, now's the time.
All right, and as the last question, I would love to just play around with our wishful thinking. Let's do a little hopium and what do you wish to see in the industry? One thing that I would love to mention, I really want you all to write it down, the book called Sovereign Individual, a really great book, and it kind of plays this scenario of a sovereign individual thesis as the end of nation state through a capitalistic competition between nation states, where they actually compete for you, for your capital, for the fruit of your labor. So I obviously I'm a little bearish on the citizenship by investment as an industry in the short term. Next 5-8 years, I'm a little bearish because I did not like to see this EU pressure on CBI. Sounds like bullshit to me. I don't think they have that power, but we'll see what happens. But I think after that, we'll see a wave of new jurisdiction coming onto market, not just with nomad visas, not just with residency through financial solvency, but an actual citizenship by investment programs. I want to see more of it in Latin America. I want to see more of it in Balkans. And as the new jurisdictions stepping into the market, we will see more competition. And now it's just in every capitalistic environment, it's a price race to the bottom and a quality race to the top. And that's what I want to see. And of course, the other thing would be I wish they could understand damn Bitcoin. I wish they could understand how you can sign a message and prove that you actually hold the coin. It's in self-custody. You don't have to provide them with exchange statement because it's a give up on your custody. I wish they could figure that out. I've been trying to educate whoever I work with in the Caribbean this whole time. So what are your wishes for the industry?
I'm also bearish on citizenship by investment. I'm extremely bullish, actually, on Bitcoin citizenship. I'm bullish on countries like El Salvador, attracting citizens based on their ideas, based on their values, offering them ways to get citizenship by making an economic contribution to the country. And I think there's a very interesting trend. We are seeing it with Bukele in El Salvador. We are seeing it with Milei in Argentina, both are declaring this new American independence with these new ideas of freedom, kind of aligning their countries and their strategies with Bitcoin and with the ascending world. And I think I'm extremely bullish on countries that follow this same strategy and decide to implement easy ways to attract people who are really passionate about these ideas, really passionate about these strategies, and offering them an exit to a system they don't believe in, the same way Bitcoin offered us an exit 10 years ago. Well,
I'll tell you, this industry has gone in waves. It goes up and down since it started when Christopher Columbus brought a bunch of immigrants to the Americas. He brokered a couple of deals there, but I agree about the Balkans. I helped create a citizenship program in Montenegro, which unfortunately the EU closed down after 4 years. There is the bureaucrats in the European Union, and I believe in Congress here, generally have a problem with rich people being allowed to buy things. They don't like it, because if they're not rich, then they're going to get jealous. And so they don't want them to buy fancy cars, they don't want them to buy airplanes, and they really don't like when they buy citizenship. And so I think until that idea is sort of cured and governments kind of change the way that they work, I think the problem in a lot of the ideas of freedom, we talk about how to get away from government. I believe more in sort of how to change government and make the people in government have some kind of financial motivation to do well, instead of being motivated to come to work and at 9 o'clock and leave at 5 without getting in trouble, which is what bureaucrats do. So as long as the bureaucrats are against people with money buying things, we're going to be not only in the CBI industry, but in business in general. There's always going to be this cat and mouse chase of the government trying to stop people from making money and being able to buy things, and people who have money or are making money and trying to build value in the world, trying to continue to do that.
If only they couldn't print the money. If only we could
control it.
If only there was a currency that was not issued by the central. Yeah. All right. I really appreciate everybody being here. Let's just go over. I'm at planbpassport.com, and you can also find me on Twitter at planbpassport. Can you guys name your websites?
Sure. It's CitizenX.com and at CitizenX on every social media.
We have a booth over there, but we're at apexcapital.partners. But come over to our booth.
Let's take a picture.
Thank you.